Welcome everyone to the January 2021 meeting of the Barnard Astronomical Society. So let me pull up our PowerPoint that we have. I hope everyone is having a good start to the year and that your 2020 closed out all right. Let's see, share my screen. Okay, let's see here. So we'll have a quick roll call with the officers. And I think I saw, is Dustin here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Great. Janet, I saw pop in, and Natoka, I believe you're here as well. And well, I don't think I've called the meeting to order actually. So let me back up and call this meeting to order. And then let's go through the approval of the minutes. So I sent out the minutes, I believe, on Monday through email. And do we have approval of those?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as read.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second.
Great. Thank you. So moving to our financial report, Janet, do you want to talk about this for a moment?
Yeah, we've had a lot of people renew. We got 10 new renewals this time. We got a new member, Brian Fry. I don't think I saw him though. And we got $292.35 in donations and membership, $76.79 for astronomical leave and whereby. And so we have $1,773.28 as of today.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, next on the list is correspondence. And we do have a submittal that was requested to be in the newsletter, but as you may know, we're in search of a newsletter editor. And I thought I would include it in our correspondence for today's meeting. And this is an article that was emailed from Victor Rogers. And I think I saw Victor, and Victor, you're welcome to comment on this. I couldn't find a date on the article, but it appears to be from a publication called The Sky. And it reads through a really great description of the origin of the observatory and the building of the telescope and what it entailed. And here I've put the first page. It's about 2 pages and then a blurb on a third page. And it had an image of the telescope here that I kind of cut out to show on the screen. But I'm going to see if we can put that up on our Facebook and the website for others to read. But I don't know, Victor, if you wanted to comment on this, if you know a little bit about the origin of this article.
No, I'm not sure.
Okay.
I think it said 1939.
No,
Okay.
no. I know about it. It is from The Sky.
Okay.
And yeah, it would be 1938, I believe, or whatever. That's when we had the first light on the telescope. The gentleman you see at the telescope is Bruce Jones, the son of. He's also helped design the observatory. And actually, Clarence Jones was more of a ramrod, and Bruce did most of the work.
Yeah, they discussed the grinding of the mirrors and how everything was done in Chattanooga, I believe.
Yes.
And yeah, it went into some pretty good detail of the building of the scope. I found it pretty interesting, but I would like to post it so that others can read it if they haven't seen it before.
The pitch lap for polishing the mirror is still down in the basement, and also part of the grinding machine is still in the basement.
Oh, wow. Wow. That's
Used
pretty
to be glass
interesting.
plates. Used to be glass plates down there, Bobby. Is it still there?
The what?
Glass plates. Glass plates.
Oh, some of those portholes you're talking about?
No, these were real early astrophotography with glass plates.
Oh,
Huh.
I don't remember ever seeing anything there with glass plates. We used film.
They were in an old filing cabinet.
Oh, those were lantern slides that we used in the lecture room when people came to visit the observatory on Friday nights.
Oh,
And Carl Huyer and Harriet Huyer carried them off.
Oh, I don't want to be in the picture.
They're
No, you're not. I'm not on.
I know more about it, but actually, I knew those people, so
Speakers default.
Headphones.
see,
I'm not sure who has their microphone turned on. I can't see.
Who's
Okay.
talking?
Yeah, I think someone has their microphone turned on.
Oh,
So if everyone will check to make sure if you're not talking that your microphone is turned off. I think that did it. Great. Any other comments about the article or the information in it?
if you need to know more, you can contact me. I lived a lot of it.
Thanks, Bobby. Okay. Moving on, we have no unfinished business to discuss. The new business and announcements. If you have any ideas or would like to give a program to the society, please contact Ralph and he can get you set up for that and put you on the schedule. If you noticed when Janet gave our checking account balance, there was an item that said donations. And I know that a couple of our members have used an opportunity through both Facebook and I think it was Amazon Smile is what Patrick had mentioned in our group IO. But there is an option if you are a Facebook user or do use Amazon to donate back to a group. And I don't know, I know I didn't ask beforehand if Matt might be willing to talk a little bit about that. You can say no and I can gather some information and give it out via email. But it's an opportunity for us to gain funds towards scholarships or for fundraising for our 100-year anniversary. So keep that in mind if you utilize those two services. But I don't know, Matt, if you have any comment, or Patrick, I believe. I think it was Amazon. That's fantastic.
Hey, Matt, I have a question. Now, how does it work with Amazon Smile? Because Amazon is probably getting her inheritance money because I use it that often. Okay. Okay. Oh, okay. Okay, I would do that.
That's fantastic. Mhm. Yeah, it was. Thank you both for that too. And thank you for sharing that information. Okay, so on to announcements. Our February program will be presented by Richard Clements, and the title of his presentation will be The Pope's Astronomer. So I'm pretty excited about that. It sounds interesting. And I have no other announcements. Are there any announcements from the membership? Anything anyone would like to share? All right. Well, we have moved rather quickly through our business part of the meeting. At this point, if there's no further business or announcements, I'll hear a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Okay, so tonight's program is by David Dickinson, and he's going to talk to us about using his Deep Sky Field Guide for observers. And we have the opportunity, thanks to David, to give away his book and a really cool face mask. And I don't have a picture of the face mask, but if you saw our Facebook post, the face mask, I believe, has constellations on it. So we will be conducting a drawing immediately after his talk.
Oh, there it is.
What was that?
I see somebody has it up there.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, I can't see anything but my slides. So the rules are, in order to be in the drawing, you must be a member in good standing and be present to win. You also, in order to put your name into the drawing, type your first and last name into the chat box. And I will write that down, and then I'll have Kevin pick out of a hat the name of the winner, and we'll get that to the winner. All right? Are there any quick questions before we get rolling with David? All right. Well, thank you. And here is David.
Thanks, Amy. Everybody can hear me, right? Okay. Yeah, because I only say that because there was a talk I did to a club about a month ago that I talked for about half an hour until I realized that I was just talking to an empty room. So, yeah, I'm like to thank Ralph, Matt, and Dustin for inviting me here too as well. I know they follow me on Twitter, and Matt has put some pictures in our second book / first book that we wrote. This is the first hard copy book. We actually wrote one with the Universe Today on a guide for 2017 astronomy that was a free ebook. So I like to actually think the Universe Today Ultimate Guide for Viewing the Cosmos was our second book that we did. Background, I'm an amateur astronomer, long time, many decades, freelance science writer. I do the space flight beat mostly for Sky and Telescope, and I do observational astronomy for Universe Today, and I've written for Meteor Watch, EOS Magazine, some other minor one-off sites but mostly Sky and Telescope and Universe Today. And I just had my second book come out, which is our Deep Sky Field Guide. and that came out from Page Street last summer. This kind of was my idea of putting a star party in a book. A lot of longtime observers, pre-internet observers, might remember Burnham's Celestial Handbook. This is one of the few things that really isn't a digital resource out there that I still have on my desktop, the hard copy, even though this was done in the 1960s. So the astrophysics in it's a little obsolete. It goes by 1950 coordinates, so a lot of the right ascension declination positions are a little out of date now that we're in 2020. But this was a classic among amateur astronomers, and everybody always had this to consult with. This was really a labor of love by Robert Burnham that he did back in the 60s. So my idea, Fraser at Universe Today, Fraser Kane, kind of said we wanted the idea of how can you locate what's up in the sky tonight? What's up in the sky on January 14th, 2020? If you were to go out right now, 7 p.m., I'm on East Coast time, what would you be able to see? So we went from that basic premise. I'm going to kind of do the old school screen sharing of just like showing it to you. And we did 2 sections in the book. And you notice I did all the maps, black and white. This is meant to be read under a red flashlight. So it's maybe not the most appealing coffee table book, which this one was more of a coffee table book, a basic guide on astronomy. This one is more meant to be, we sprung to have it as a wire bound, lay it down on the table next to you kind of field guide. So you're out there, and really, it was really a challenge to do this with the publisher because they wanted it under 200 pages. And I was like, you're telling me to cover everything in the sky. Burnham's is 3 volumes, 300-page volumes. So this really forced me to go down. I looked at it as the opportunity to boil down the very best of the best and kind of go through the first section. The book is basically in 2 sections. There is the sky month by month in each hemisphere. So there's 12 by 2, 24 sections. And we're going from basically that evening sky for January, February, and we're doing the naked eye sky in the first section. We're saying, if you're out there, what's the direction of the Milky Way? What's the direction of the ecliptic? This is all deep sky. We don't deal a lot with like Burnham's, we don't deal with solar system objects in this as much. We're dealing with deep sky astronomy. Where are the constellations? What kind of tales and mythology, which I really enjoyed doing and getting into some research in this one because we didn't do that a lot with the first book. But a lot of that comes in, again, with that idea of doing a star party in a book, where a lot of this is stuff that when you're out under the night sky that you're actually telling these stories of Orion and Leo. And we wanted to get into some more international stories rather than the Greek myth stories are well known, and those, of course, are mandatory to be in there. But there's also a lot of Native American stories, and we went into Southern astronomy. We actually got to go into a lot of Australian, South American, South African kind of myths out there. And I actually learned quite a bit digging into, you could write a book, and there are many, many books out there on astronomical mythology. But I think it's interesting and important to do it because it lends something into the actual art of astronomy as an art as opposed to a science. And it actually gives you some idea, when you read through history, you read which king ruled when, which battle happened when. But when you read the mythology of the Greeks, and you see what their stories were at the night sky, kind of gives you some psychological insights to what their hopes and fears were and what they put up there in the sky and what stories they told. So I think that facet of it is kind of fascinating. When we went into the second section, I decided to break the sky down, give you a little bit of context here, on those sky maps right along the meridian. As you know, the best place to observe is when things are right at the zenith and crossing right over the meridian because they're through the thinnest section of the atmosphere. We also put a section of corresponding numbers. These correspond to the 20 maps where we took the sky, divided it down into 20 sections, and we went from the North Celestial Pole, broke it down by latitude. And this, again, we had to be very discriminating as far as to break the sky down into 20 sections and put them on 75% size, full-size charts. Incidentally, when I was doing these originally, this is what the draft looked like, and they were the maps were on full page size charts. I would still like to Kickstarter and actually do the maps separate. again, the publisher, we had to get it down into 200 pages, so we compromised with 75% size. Map editing is its whole thing. As I learned how to do all this basically on my own. But to do the sky maps, we decided to break it down to 10th magnitude was our cutoff. That way we were doing, again, with that idea of the star part in the book, we were doing best objects, all the Messier catalog, brighter NGCs. We threw in a few challenge objects, like there are tables in there for finding the best red dwarfs in the sky, finding the best quasars, which of course are very faint. Some challenge objects in there. So then we do get into some fainter galaxies, but I didn't want this, and I really couldn't with the space that was provided, go down into 12th magnitude, 13th magnitude galaxies, because it would be, then you'd be kind of laundry listing and it wouldn't keep it as tight. As a matter of fact, I have the best red dwarfs for brighter than 10th magnitude, along with one of our better double star diagrams there. Double stars, I tried to do double stars that were wider than an arc second, again, to kind of get into keeping it with the best of the best, so you didn't have a big laundry list of double stars in there. But yeah, it's in the book, again, is meant to be cross-referenced back and forth. All the constellations, again, were listed. We did a table in the back of, it's really kind of, like I said, a star party in the book was kind of the idea I tried to keep in the front of my head. We go through some basic descriptive astrophysics in the front. I had to get some friends of mine that are real astronomers that kind of make sure I was getting, again, that could be a book. And I boiled it down to in about 10 pages, basically the lives of stars, kind of giving you an idea of what it is you were seeing out there as far as the life cycles of stars, how we know these things over the years, like how our history and knowledge of astronomy has evolved. And to really boil that down is like what you're seeing in the time scale of, like when you're looking at the closest stars in like Sirius and Alpha Centauri. Southern Hemisphere astronomy was actually kind of interesting to do because I've been down there a couple times. I'm not as, I don't have the southern constellations like memorized as much as I do the northern ones. I always thought it was interesting when I've gone down to the Southern Hemisphere, not only to see, the mandatory objects, and we talk about, if you go down there and you've only been down there once, you should see the large Magellanic Cloud, the small Magellanic Cloud. You should see Omega Centauri, although you can see Omega Centauri from the southern states around April or so, if you know exactly where, the Southern Cross, the coal sack. But also what I think is an interesting observation is to see familiar constellations upside down. I thought it's something that I didn't think would strike me, but to see Orion or Leo or because you still see a lot of familiar constellations, but I never really thought much of that. And also thought it was interesting to see the sun rise in the east, transit to the north, and then set in the west. And we talk about those kind of just little interesting observations. I've been to Kenya, been to Australia, been to Ecuador, Peru. So I've been down south. The only place I haven't checked off is Antarctica, which would be kind of cool, maybe someday. But Southern Hemisphere astronomy is fascinating, and they have a lot of the very best objects down in that area. So that's pretty much the book. And I try to throw in a lot of little factoids, some interesting things. There are some things that I find at an astronomy party, like, say, when you're looking at the direction that the Voyager spacecraft are going or the Pioneer spacecraft are going, it's not anything that you can look at observationally, but to point a laser pointer off in those directions, or the core of our galaxy, and to say there's a supermassive black hole in the core of the galaxy and pointing a laser off in that direction, or to say that's where 51 Peg, the first exoplanet discovered around a main sequence star, is located. Just to have those sorts of things out there to show people, I think it's nifty to just kind of know that's the direction. Like near the Hercules-Vega border, we talk about, actually, we're going through the naked eye sky, what they call the apex of the sun's way, just to point off and say, we know, and this is based on proper motion studies, that our sun is headed off in that direction. And kind of those kind of things are kind of nifty things to talk about at star parties, even though you don't really have anything to show, like at the eyepiece. It's just an interesting thing to talk about. And we kind of keep that. The book itself, when we're doing the star charts are meant, get it up where I can see it, with the idea of being able to star hop. That was the whole concept of the book. So although we have the right ascension declination coordinates on there, we also have a standard 5-degree field of view finder on there. So you can actually use these to star hop. So that's basically the book. I mean, it's available on Amazon. It's interspersed with a lot of amateur photos in it. And again, it's our idea. I think we nailed it the closest this time of having an actual star part in the book, that the ability to find what's in the sky tonight. So, I mean, that's I'll take questions.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions for David?
Hi, David. This is Bobby Thompson.
Okay.
I have a house with my daughter and I in Phoebus, and I'm a member of the Virginia Peninsula Astronomer Stargazers.
Okay.
You know, we do programs at the Virginia Living History Museum, and we used to do the planetarium shows at Buckrow Middle School.
Okay. I'm based in Norfolk, actually, in Virginia.
That's the reason I'm telling you that. I saw you were in Norfolk.
Yeah, I enjoy it here. It's I observe actually, especially with the quarantine going on right now. I go out with the local club occasionally, but we've been, of course, kind of like foregoing those in the past year. I actually observed from the parking garage rooftop here, which is very light polluted, but it's open to the sky, and we can actually see launches from Wallops here when they launch at night. So that's kind of interesting to see.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, you know, darkest sky was up at Yorktown, State Forest. Yeah,
I've heard that. And
State Forest.
there's some areas down the Dismal Swamp I had heard too that are fairly dark sites. And out along the Outer Banks, I know North Carolina. Again, I'd like to get down there. I actually had a chance to review 2 smart scopes last year. I also write for a site called Astro Gear Today, and these I had 2 of these scopes to play with during quarantine that are totally smartphone controlled. One was from a company called Vionis, and another was the EV scope from Unistellar. I like the Unistellar scope a little better. It seemed a little more hands-on, but they were both kind of fun toys to play with. And I could do deep sky astronomy even from downtown Norfolk, which I thought was kind of cool. I had it for Comet Neowise actually too. I had the EV scope, so I got to play with it on that.
Hey, Dave. This is Dustin, by the way.
Okay. Yeah.
Glad you were able to join us.
I know you're on Twitter.
Hey, one thing that I have been really interested in, if you recall it's been a few months now, our other member that was speaking earlier, Matt Harbinson, and a few of the others were in Texas in Marathon, and they actually caught the re-entry of the rocket body that you and I got on Twitter and helped spread the word about.
Yeah.
And they've got the awesome footage on the news stations down there. I have always been very curious. How did you get into that? And could you briefly just kind of describe some of the methodology behind the tracking? Because it seems like everything that comes down, you know where it's coming down and when.
And I know some other contacts that if you know Marco Langbroek over in the Netherlands, he is a very dedicated satellite tracker, and he's on Twitter. Yeah, it's an interesting little subfield and there are some amateurs out there that's all they do is track satellites and reentries. There's a few things I'm looking at. Heavens Above has actually been a very venerable site for satellite tracking for the longest time. They're pulling all their stuff off another site called Space Track, which you have to have it's actually NORAD runs that, and that you have to have a subscription to it. But that's one I'm always hitting every day just to look and see if there's any new. They have all the reentries except the classified stuff up there. And there's still a lot of amateurs that are tracking classified satellites. There's a message board called CSAT-L, that for the longest time is usually when something classified goes up, there's all the chatter back and forth, and amateurs like Marco are out there generating what they call 2-line elements in order to try to, I'm plugging in what they call 2-line elements. It's like an ephemeris, only it's for satellite. It's like these coded 2-line elements, when you put them into a program in a text file like Orbitron, which is another desktop satellite tracking program I use, then you can make predictions as far as where they're going to pass for your latitude and longitude. I usually direct people to Heavens Above for satellite tracking, because the question I get, and I actually address this, there's a whole chapter in the first book on satellite tracking, is I get this a lot on Twitter. It's like, I saw this bright object at this time. What is it? And I'm like, well, if you can give me what your location is, what your time is to the nearest minute, I can, and you kind of give me the direction in the sky. And I break down that whole question in this book. I was like, you can go on somewhere like Heavens Above and say, set it for your latitude and longitude, and then start filtering it down by magnitude, because you can do that in the satellite database. And you can look in there and say, what are the objects that are passing over tonight? And Heavens Above even has an app now, which I'm up there on the roof sometimes just using. And I can ID, it's handy because I can ID satellites on the fly with something like this. See if it will do it. This is basically just showing me, it's free on Android. I don't think they have a Apple version of it out there, but it basically shows you, it's like what's going overhead tonight. It won't show you every object. Like I said, classified objects aren't in there. There's satellites, it's filtering down by magnitude too. So sometimes there's brighter satellites out there that aren't going to show up in the feed. But I've actually thought about, there's not many amateur books out there about satellite tracking. There's some about the history of satellite tracking, but I think that could be expanded on. Like I said, I have one chapter in this book where I break down what is a 2-line element, how do you track satellites, what types of satellites are up there. And this was all written pre-Starlink too, so that's changed everything as well.
I think I've used Heavens Above ever since it first came out.
I used Heavens Above in Italy to track Mir. That's how long it's been around. So it's but no, satellite tracking
no, I was just going to say it's shocking. I don't know that many people realize how many and how frequently we have the re-entries. That's something I didn't really know until I started following you on.
There's a site called Aerospace. Let's see here. I have it up on my feed. My quick one. I'm hitting every.
Uh-oh.
Well, it looks like we may have just lost him.
He hit the wrong button.
Oh, here he comes. He's back.
All right. I think I'm back.
John Sadler, turn your camera.
Hey, yeah, you're back.
All right. Yeah, I didn't realize it wouldn't pop it up in another window. There's a site called aerospace.org that usually is listing reentries, and there's a few good Twitter follows out there. Jay Remus is another one that tracks just satellites. Marco Langbroek, a bulk of what he does is satellites. Andrew Jones does a lot with the Chinese space program, tracking what they're doing. I'm trying to think. Oh, I can't think of his name, but he's a astronomer at the Center for Astrophysics, but he does a lot of satellite tracking. Yeah, so it's interesting because satellite tracking is something that it's swiftly changed. Like when the first Starlinks went up, that was probably one of my busiest days ever on Twitter when we first heard, like, we had no idea these were going to be that visible. It was actually the famous video you saw. That was Marco Langbroek that shot that evening. We see the pearly string of satellites that he put up on Vimeo. That was a very interesting, because then suddenly everybody was clamoring for predictions on these things. So we were all trying to figure out, and I was literally just saying, it's like, if you tell me once I had the 2-line elements loaded into Orbitron, I was just telling people, it's like, tell me your location and I can give you then you got to get into time zones, and you got to like tell people, it's like, if you could just, everybody compute your time to universal time, and it's so much easier than trying to figure out, okay, you're -4, you're -5, you're a half-hour time zone, you don't do DST. It's like, that was an interesting time.
Give you some history. We were a Moonwatch team here.
Oh, cool.
And 1957, I guess it was, or 56.
There was a.
And
go ahead.
And actually, my mentor, Llewellyn Evans, we had a 12-inch Schmidt camera mounted on our telescope.
Wow.
And his thing was, he wanted to try to find some satellites between us and the moon. And so we did a lot of photography of, spaces like that. And then we had the tracking station, and there were no predictions sent out hardly then. But one of the guys got access to the IBM 704 at the Federal Building, or TVA maybe. I don't remember which one it was. But anyway, and he ran our satellite tracking, and we had all those little 50 millimeter telescopes pointed at the sky, and then we confirmed whether that was correct or not, and that was sent to the Smithsonian.
Did you have those little tabletop ones where they lined everybody up and you were looking down into the mirror?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen photos of that. There's a good book a few years ago. It was called I believe it was The True Tale of Operation Moonwatch, and they went through that whole history of. I'd like to see one of those old scopes. Those old scopes must be laying around somewhere. Those old.
Oh yeah, I have friends that still have theirs.
Oh, very
I have
cool.
parts. I have parts of mine. Matter of fact, I got one laying over here on the floor.
That's great. Yeah, it's. I always tell people too is a lot of people when if you saw the movie October Sky where they're standing out watching Sputnik go over, it's like most people actually saw the booster. The satellite was actually very tiny, but
I don't think anybody ever saw Sputnik itself.
But the booster was much bigger. That's true of a lot of the things you see up there in orbit. A lot of them are discarded boosters that are up there. That's there's just a lot of space junk still flying around. So. But no, satellite tracking is fun.
One of our guys was an amateur radio operator, and I think they were transmitting on something like 21 megahertz or something like that. And so we listened to it when we go across.
There are people that listen to the ISS. There are ham radio operators that tune in when the International Space Station passes over. I know that do tune into. And what's really, it's fun when there's like there recently just was when one of the cargo ships docks or undocks, or back when the shuttle was flying, I've been able to catch when you could see both of them moving across the sky.
Oh yeah,
that's always fun to send out predictions. There's a friend of mine, Adrian, his handle is Virtual Astro over in the United Kingdom. He does. It's interesting over in the United Kingdom. If the launch geometry is right, a lot of times something chasing the ISS will fly right over the UK, and if it's dusk or dawn, they'll get a good view of it. So that's always kind of fascinating.
Yeah.
Oh, very cool. Oh, very cool. No, I'm usually up there watching. If it's a clear night, I'm usually up watching for satellites like any. A lot of the more high interest ones are like the International Space Station, Hubble, but you got to be a low enough inclination. Florida, we would see Hubble quite a bit, but it's on a lower inclination. So up here in Virginia, it's kind of low to the horizon. The OTV-6 mission, well, we used to be the Air Force, now it's Space Force, the X-37B. Their little mini shuttle that's and that's classified, but there's people that are always tracking it. So and they move it occasionally too. It has the ability to kind of slightly tweak its orbit. So it's always interesting to try to, heavens above does predict it, but their predictions are only as good as like what's been input. So a lot of times it's kind of a hunt to find it. So that's another high interest satellite. And China's going to be launching a space station again this year too, a new one. So that's going to be interesting to hunt for. There's a lot going on in space this year, actually, in space flight. We've got like the James Webb Telescope may or may not finally go. We've got several missions going to the moon on the NASA's CLIPS program. I know about this because I just wrote about the roundup for Sky and Telescope for what's going on in 2021. We have 3 Mars missions arriving next month. Yeah, there's quite a bit of, which is good. We need good news. So it's actually good. We have a lot of space flight stuff going on.
Yeah, you stole my thunder. I was going to remind everyone that Perseverance is landing in February.
I forget. I don't have the date in front of my eyes, but I know it's in February.
I looked it up today. It's the 18th at like 3-something in the afternoon. They'll start the live feed at 2:15.
That's better than Curiosity landed like at 2 in the morning for it.
Yes.
But I remember we all stayed up for it. But no, That's going to be cool. And China's landing in. China's an interesting one to track because they don't put out as much press info. I know as press, it's harder to, we actually go by a lot of the people that are observers, like Andrew Jones, like observers of the Chinese space program, and we're watching their CCT news feeds, and it's hard to get a lot of information out of. Like when they did their sample return last month, we were all following it, but they did cover some of it live, to their credit, which is unusual for them, but it's hard to get a lot of good press contacts into their space program. As far as it's kind of almost a little bit like the way it was in the Cold War, where we're kind of like we're kind of guessing as far as what they're doing.
Other questions? Okay.
Yeah, I was just going. I'll add one last thing, Dave, real quick. Sorry,
No
Amy.
problem.
It'll be quick. You mentioned the Omega Centauri, and we were able to actually, Matt, when you guys helped me out, I think it was in this right before COVID hit, maybe March timeframe. We were able to actually image that one just about 20 miles, 30 miles southwest of Chattanooga. We were able to get that earlier this year.
What's your rough latitude?
What somebody want to help me out there?
35.
Okay, that's pretty good because in Florida,
and we shot it through limbs. I mean, we were shooting it through branches of trees on the horizon, but we were able to actually capture it.
I think it's.
I see it here at my house.
I think it's in late April in the evening. If you look due south, because I know in Florida we would catch it like at the Winter Star Party we would catch, but down there toward the Keys it's like 25 latitude or something. But a lot of people don't know you can see those. I actually did write up in the first book a short section on, and I think it's in the Deep Sky Guide. I kind of reiterated there are some Southern Hemisphere objects you can pick off from up north. And I think I reversed it and said, here are some of the northern objects you can pick off if you're like permanently based down south. So, you know, there are, people don't realize it's not entirely a different sky. You still see a lot of the familiar sky from the usual southern latitude locations people go to, like Peru or Ecuador or even Kenya. You're just below the south of the equator, not far. So you've got a pretty good view of both sides. So I have a friend, Corey Schmidt, on Twitter in South Africa. He does a lot of photography down there. So very envious. They have a lot of the better, they have a better look at the Milky Way down there too.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Dave. And big thanks for donating your book.
Yeah, no problem. A true story, that mask, a friend of mine made those up custom, and she had to order an entire sheet of cloth, so she made like a dozen. I'm like, well, I only have one face, so I've been giving away the other ones as the books go out. I've just been sliding them in with the package, so it's like I only need one for myself. So
that is great.
David, this is Ralph. I really appreciate you doing this.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
And whoever wins the book tonight, just let me know, and I'll get with you on how I'll get the book to you.
Hey, review it on Amazon too. That's where writers really care about people talking about their book. So if you like it, and even if you don't, I mean, just like, you know, I'm always open to good positive feedback too. That's the proper way to say it. So,
well, I enjoyed it. It's a good book.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to give a last call for anyone who would like to enter their name. If you would like to enter your name, again, you must be a member in good standing and present. To enter, just type your name in the chat window. I've recorded all the names that were previously